Thank you very much, John. I hope everyone can hear me. And welcome to the session here. Just to introduce myself and this session as well. So we're looking at, first of all, at GCSE PE Units 2 and 4. Which is the performance in GCSE physical education. As I said, my name is Tony Scott, and I am the this is me. I am the principal moderator, which means this particular unit that we're looking at are my particular responsibility. And also, I am the chief examiner, so I do have authority over the rest of the course as well. So I'll be looking at lots of different windows as we go through, so I'll try to keep up, obviously, with all the things that are going on. First of all, a little introduction about the event and the day which we've had, and then we'll go on through having a look at a little bit at the candidates' statistics of last year's exam, and then moving on to the practical activities and moderation, and then there'll be a short comfort break. We will look at performance fitness unit, the personal exercise program, and the analysis of performance. And obviously, at some times there will be questions as well. I will be trying, or we will be trying, to use a little bit of video to give you some idea of practical activities as well. So we'll move on. So the aims and objectives then, as I said, looking at the practical activity areas, that's where we're concentrating on. Looking at things like differentiated practices. The practices should match the activity and the level of the candidate, and that we'll be looking at that. Also having a look at the personal exercise program and the analysis of performance, and seeing how that can link with the other section of the course, which is the theory paper, and to enhance their knowledge and understanding through the practical activity. We also then, as I said, we'll be looking at the analysis of performance, and you will have some opportunity as well to ask questions. So, what is the course? First of all, what is it called? Well, the bit that we're looking at to start with is 5PE01, 02. 5PE01 is the theory, 5PE02 is the long course practical performance. And then we have, for some of you who are doing the short course, 5PE04. The reason I make these points is that it is very important when you're filling in forms and when you're getting information. If things are referred to by these numbers, you actually know what they're referring to and what the implications are of these particular courses. So then let's have a look at what is involved. Okay, so for the long course, I suspect that most of you, and we'll find out in a bit more detail later, I suspect that most of you will be putting your students through the long course or the full course, as it's sometimes called as well. So the short course, so the long course has 4 activities. So the students would do 4 activities, a minimum of 2 as a performer. They could do 2 as a performer and 1 as leader and 1 as official, or various combinations, but at minimum of 2 as an actual performer. And they must come from 2 different areas of activity. In the short course, they only have to do 2 actual activities. A minimum of 1 must be as a performer. Again, from 2 different activities. All the students have to do an analysis of performance and a personal exercise program, and there's no difference between long course and short course in that. They all have to do an analysis of performance and a PEP, whichever course they're actually offering. There used to be what was called a 5PE top-up unit, where students could do the long course and then top up to the first course. But that course is now gone. So we just to make sure that you know that the activity groups we'll also have a look at. So what about the moderation and the moderation day? First of all, you'll have contact with the moderator. The moderator will contact you probably early in January. That would be the aim. There is a window then when your students would need to be moderated. and that window is normally between round about the 1st of March up until the 1st of May. But the moderator will tell you that, and also it will be shown on the documents, which I'll talk to you about later. The moderator will expect from you an initial contact questionnaire. And on that questionnaire, you will have various questions about the course, so the moderator can know what to expect from your moderation day. Because there are hundreds of centres that do the course, but I cannot imagine that any two centres actually have exactly the same things going on the moderation day. There'll be various numbers of students taking the course. Some will be boys' schools, some will be girls' schools, mixed schools, and so on. Some may have a visit, some may have a video, and so on. So the moderator will want to have that questionnaire so they can get a background of where you are coming from in terms of your centre. So on there, the first thing will be your name. You will be the contact at the school. How they will contact you, your school telephone number, your email address, the number of candidates you've got, the number of boys, the number of girls, and what course you're offering. Is it just a long course? Is it just a short course? Or do you have students for each? How many students do you have? If you've got more than 20 candidates, or if you've got less than 20 candidates, because that's the cut-off point for whether you get an actual visit or whether you do a DVD moderation. What practical activities will you be offering? Which practical activities would you propose to offer on the day of the moderator visit? And some discussion will take place between you. What facilities do you have? In my centre, for example, we had some activities that went on site, and things like personal survival, because we didn't have a swimming pool, went on off site. Do you have any video evidence that you need to submit, even if you're going to get a moderator visit? And that might be for things like activities that are going on for students outside of the school environment. How many students for performer? How many students for the official? How many students for leader? And this information will help then to set up your moderation day. And as I always say to moderators when we train them every year, there should be no surprises on moderation day. So when is the day? Well, as I said, sometime between the end of February, 1st of March, and May the 1st. And then you've got a couple of weeks then to usually round about the 15th of May to get all your documentation into the moderator. Are there any exceptions to this? Yes, there are. Actually, we can do a poll here. Sorry, Abby. Yes, we'd like to do this poll now so I can get an idea how many people do have more or less than 20 candidates. And we're having our poll. I can see it going on now. So I think I can take it from that there's not many. Most of you have got more than 20 candidates. So we're talking, I think, about a moderator, a visit here to you. So I will be mentioning about DVD and DVD evidence anyway, but I obviously will know now exactly where we're coming from in that. Okay. One of the exceptions to the moderation, of course, are things that may go on outside the moderation window. Things like trekking, you may only be able to offer Oh, sorry. We got a next questionnaire. Sorry. Are you new to Edexcel? This will help me put things a bit more into context. Okay, so I can have a look at what we've got now. Are you new to Edexcel? Well, it looks like most of you are not. Have you been on Edexcel course? Some almost 50-50 there. Are you new to a moderation day? Some people are, of course, and some people are not. It's just so that I can get an idea there of where we're at in that respect. Okay, so there may be some questions on that which you may come up with later on. I think where we got to here was things that may go on outside the moderation window. For example, things like trekking. I mention this because if this is so, it is certainly something that you need to make clear to the moderator before the moderation day. So if you have been a number of students doing trekking, then the moderator would need to know about that. Now, this is a little bit complicated. If you, for example, will be moderating candidates on moderation day, and you will be taking a ski trip and marking those candidates, then that is fine. But you do need to make sure your moderator knows that. If the person taking the trekking is not going to be moderating on the moderation day, then you will need some video evidence. But you need to make sure that the moderator knows that. So once again, that is something that's really important to discuss with the moderator. Then there may be things that you have going on off-site, and there may be needed video evidence for that as well. But if you're going off to mark those students, a bit like the trekking, then you won't need the video evidence. If you need video evidence, it is quite helpful to have a storyboard. I've had video evidence to mark over a number of years now, and the centres that make a good storyboard, in other words, what they intend to do in the different activities, is very, very helpful. I haven't got one to show you, but I can give you, talk you through an example. For example, I had one for netball last year, where there weren't many candidates doing it, obviously, because it was less than 20, but the teacher set out for what they were going to start with, the activity. How they were going to start the activity by introducing each candidate. And each candidate was going to be numbered, and they would show the number of the candidate. Then the practice that they would start with, the candidates that would be involved in that activity. And then they would move on to small game situations. And then they would move on into a game. And it was all set out very neatly, and I knew all the numbers and the colours that the candidates were going to wear during the activity. So that was very, very helpful to me as the moderator. So what needs to be done before the moderation? Well, some of you obviously have been through that before. Oh, sorry, I think I appear to have a question. If you'd like to put that up, Abby, let me know what that question is. Is the day moderation or controlled assessment? Okay, it's exactly the same thing. It is finally controlled assessment now. And if you think about the criteria, is now called the controlled assessment guide. So it is controlled assessment that we're actually talking about here. So I'll continue to use that term as we go through. What needs to be done before moderation? Well, it's very important that you have what's called the ICA document, the instructions for the conduct of the controlled assessment. And everything you need to know about forms, how to go through the forms, what needs to be done on the forms, will go on these forms. This is the P2AS, and you will need to fill those in for each different activity. So you put the centre name, centre number, as you can see there, teacher, assessor, and so on, and the names of the candidates taking part in that activity. Okay, so we can remove that one now, and we move on to the next one. This is the ICA document, instructions for the controlled assessment. It is important that you make sure it's got the right date on the front, because this one obviously was for last summer, 2012. In the same way, it's very important that you make sure you have the latest up-to-date forms, and they are just being tweaked a little bit from last year. So just make sure you've got the absolute right forms. Okay. Okay. If we can go back to the screen now and have a look at what we were talking about. Okay. Thank you. Now, also, you'll need your form to give estimated marks for the candidates. So you will have probably run the course for the candidate. Let's say it's netball or football, depending on what you've been doing. And you probably will have told the candidates, if you'd been doing this on the controlled assessment day, the mark you were likely to get would be 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever it is. That's not going to be their mark, but you at least have an idea of where they'll be at. you can then either use that mark or use your knowledge of the ability of the candidates based upon the criteria for that activity of where the candidate is for their estimated mark. That's not their final mark. The mark they get is the mark they do for their performance on the controlled assessment day, and the mark you give them then. So that's for the performance. If it's for an official or the leader, the mark you give them at that time of when you're assessing them before the day is their final mark. On the day of the moderation, they're aiming to confirm the mark that you've actually given them. Now, if you do have official or leader candidates, it's very important that they have a logbook. And there is an example of a logbook in the controlled assessment student workbook. And that's just an example, but you can make your own up. There's no problem with that, but it's just to make sure that you have, that the students can show that they've actually done the course, they've followed the course over at least a 9 to 12 week period. Also, the marks for the analysis of performance will go on the form, and that again will be their final mark. And on the day, in the analysis of performance, they will be confirming the mark that they've actually given. Okay, we've got a question, I think, from Tanya, which is the ICA document. You'll be directed to the internet to go to the website to download the ICA document. So, but having said that, your moderator would probably send you a copy anyway, because it's easy to send it as an electronic copy. Okay, so if we move on, so there are a set of forms which have to go to the moderator before the day. That's so the moderator can be well prepared for the day. Okay, so this is so the moderator can then prepare their paperwork before they come to you on the visit to your centre to do the actual moderation. Those of you who've been with us maybe for a longer time might have referred to that ICA document as the ICE document, but it's now called ICA document, as I said. Funnily enough, I was talking to somebody today about this, and I actually took the person through the ICA document, and they were quite pleased because then they saw that everything they needed was going to be in there. As I said, it can be obtained from the moderator or it's on the website. Also, another couple of things that are very helpful to you on the website. If you haven't used Ask the Expert before, then that's a community facility there where you can go to the website, you can ask for the Ask the Expert and type in a question, and that will go to an appropriate person. I am allegedly an expert, so the question may come to me or a couple of other people. If you haven't done signed up to the community's website, then I would ask you to do that, please, because that is very important. It's run by a lady. You can see, I think, there on the next little bullet point that there's a Penny Lewis runs that, and it would be very helpful if you logged into that and signed up for that, because one, you can go to it and find out information. Probably even more important, if new things come out or if things become available, you will get an email. So something like if or when the new ICA document comes out, you would get an email saying you can now access the ICA document, the new one that's just come out, and that's now available to you. So that's also very helpful, I think. So what about the controlled assessment day? Well, it is important to get the best out of your students to make sure it runs as well as possible. And some people do obviously run, and many people in fact do run fantastic controlled assessment days. And it is also happening more and more that people have a practice controlled assessment day. Now, one of the things that's very helpful here is that, for example, if your students are doing badminton, they will know who their partner is going to be. They will know what badminton court they're going to be on. They will know what number they are. They will know what practices they're going to do. and they will be able then to do their assessment and not be and they will know exactly what's going to come up and what's going to be doing next. Also, you need to make sure about whether it's if it's a live assessment or by video, that it doesn't matter. You can still have your practice controlled assessment day. The students obviously need to be identified. It is crucial, even if I'm coming on a visit, for example, that the students are identified and I can clearly see them. But if they're not clearly identified and I'm actually there, I can ask you to make sure they are clearly identified or ask you who they are. But if it's on a DVD, it could mean that a student does something really, really well and I can't see who that student is. So it is really important to make sure that they're clearly in numbered bibs or colours or whatever. If it's something like personal survival or swimming, then they should be in numbered caps. That would help as well. The other thing, if it's on a DVD, is commentary is very helpful. So try to make sure that the moderator at least knows who is actually doing the performance. So for example, if the students are doing personal survival and they're doing the help or they're doing the huddle, it would help to talk through the names of the candidates so the moderator knows exactly who they are. Then the possibility is that students may get injured either on the day or before the day. Once again, in the last year's ICA document, page 19, and that tells you exactly what to do in that situation and how to go about asking for special consideration. Okay, we've moved on to the next slide anyway. Okay, using the criteria. Well, the students get their marks from the criteria, and it is really, really essential that that you use the criteria. I always found it very helpful to give the students a copy of the criteria, so that if they have a copy at the start of the course, they know exactly what they're expected to do, and they know what exactly is expected of them. So that is one way of using the criteria. They can also target set. If they know where they are at the moment, and it may be their estimated mark, they can see why they're not the next mark higher. And so they know what things they have to work on to get that next higher mark. It also is helpful for the teacher, because if they can see that their average ones in the class are around a particular mark, then they can set their targets up higher and work on their practices to get them to that higher level. Okay, so we've got a question then. What if they score more highly in the practice assessment if it's in the window and exam conditions? Can it be used? Right. I'm not exactly sure of where you're coming from with that one. The mark they get is on the day. So if the moderator comes in and they're doing, say, netball or say football, the mark they give then that they're given to them then by you is given straight away to the moderator, and that's their mark. They can't improve upon it at a later time in the window. On the day is the mark that they get. If they do in the practice assessment a higher mark, then once again that's not the mark they get. It's got to be the one that they get on the one in front of the moderator. Personally, I always found they were more likely to do better on the day, because it's for mine it was like it's the cup final, or it's a championship or something like that, and that was what they've been leading up to. So for the most part, for me, I found that they did actually better on the day. Now we're moving down this slide now, and what I'd like to say here is the next thing is really crucial. The criteria helps you to set out what practices you want to do. There's no point in having very easy practices for students who are top standard. It has to test them at the level that you're expecting their marks to be. So if you've got candidates who you think are 7, 8, 9, 10, the practices have got to test those things. I think of it for example, in basketball, where at the top end, you're expecting them to be able to do good jump shots. So you must create a situation where they can demonstrate their jump shots, and then good jump shots in the game situation. So creating situations where we can see them performing at the best level. And obviously, you need the criteria for marking the candidates. You look at the candidates, you see where they fit in the criteria. The other thing I would say is it does help as well to put them, particularly if you're new to this, to put them in a rank order. And then you can see where they fit. And it might be that the best one is not a 10. They might not even be a 9. But what you also have to consider is your best one may be actually better than a 10. So your third one could also be a 10. So the first thing would be, I think, to put them into rank order, and then to put them in the correct position on the actual criteria. Now, the next thing, a question here, is the mark from the teacher or moderator? Say teacher gives a 10 and the moderator gives 9, what counts? Okay, you give all your marks into the moderator. The moderator goes away and they have a selection of candidates. Depending upon how many candidates you've got, they would aim to see 40 performances on the day, if that's at all possible. They then look at a cross-section of the marks from some of the high, some of the middle, some of the lower. They look at the marks that they've given and the marks that you've given, and then they work out the differences, and there's then a formula for working out if the differences are great or too high, then the marks may be adjusted. If the mark, and that may be up or down depending upon what the actual marks are actually given. But they would be adjusted only if there was a discrepancy over a particular percentage. But that would be reflected then in what we're going to come back to a little bit later, which is called an E9 report. At the end of the moderation, the moderator will write a report. That report then is sent to you, and you must make sure you get it, because it may sort of go to your exams officer or something like that. That will actually come to you, so that you will get a report back on what you've done on the day. If the assessment is not on moderation day, it once again depends exactly on that formula. So say you've got 50 or 60 candidates, I come in, I would not necessarily see all of those candidates. I would have selected my cross-section of marks before the day. I would then get those marks from you at the end of the moderation, and then I would put those into my form, which is the EdXL form, and then we would see what over those 40 marks, what the discrepancy was. And then if that's a higher than a certain percentage, then the mark would be changed. And then, but that would be all the candidates. And that could be, so if a candidate wasn't seen on that day, if it was thought that the assessment was out of range, the assumption would be that if they're out of range on the day, then they would be out of range if it was on a different day. Okay, where I was coming to, I think, was the last bullet point here. And the last bullet point is, on the day, you're not allowed to teach or coach. So I have had to speak to teachers occasionally about this, not very often, because most of them know that now. But it's a controlled assessment day. It's an examination, if you like. It's not a coaching session. On the day, then, what about the number of activities? Perfection would be, say you've got 4 teachers, the perfection would be 4 different activities from at least 2 different areas being shown on the day. A different teacher for each activity, but the teacher that taught them would, generally speaking, be the one that would mark them on the day. We would expect more than one teacher at the session, so it would be one teacher to run the session and one teacher to mark the session, because believe me, it's not that easy to run a session and mark it at the same time. So but it would be possible for the teachers to confer. So if one teacher A is running the session, teacher B who's marking it could discuss it with the marks with the teacher A. So that would be quite okay to do that. The number of candidates in the activity, well, we would be hoping for a minimum of 10 with a norm of about 20. If it was football, say 22. I was at the centre last year. They had 46 girls for netball, so they had 2 groups. They put the 2 groups, so they were top, middle and bottom in each group. And so I then chose which group I was actually going to see. I did occasionally glance across to the other group because they were both going at the same time, but I concentrated on one particular group where I had a cross-section of marks, and I had a teacher there that was actually marking those candidates with another teacher running the session. So this is the player participants. With officials and leaders, then they're not all going to be doing it at the same time. And once again, it would be a selection. Generally speaking, there would not be many officials and leaders. And once again, this is the discussion before the moderation day. So that, went to a centre last year, 3 officials. I saw the best one, I saw the weakest one, and they both were umpiring in netball. And so that was fine. And that was just to justify the mark that they'd been given. But it is crucial that those candidates have their logbooks. Because although I didn't see the middle candidate, I was able to look at the logbooks of all 3 and talk to them about their work and what they've been doing and what was in their logbooks, and ask them questions about their logbooks. So this is then the activity groups. So we have an outwitting opponents group, used to be called games. Well, you can see the titles down there, and you'll see what things fit into where. Where I'm coming from this is that it is important to make sure you know, particularly if they've got things like taekwondo or something like that, what group that activity falls into. So that is important. In terms of what they offer, they have to do something from at least 2 different groups. So they could do 3 from A and 1 from B. The important thing, and I'll probably be going on quite a bit effectively about the fitness training group, if they do that last group, F, exercise safely and effectively, that's basically what we used to call fitness training, the fitness training group. And if they do that group, they can do any other 3 activities, because that's the only one in that group, and any 3 other 3 activities would actually work. I'm just looking at some more questions there. The mark that they get, well, I think I've answered that one as well. I'm just looking to see if there's any more questions that I need to go. Right, okay, I'm just looking at do we submit our predicted mark for students who are injured or unable to participate in the moderation day? Right, okay. If a student is injured, then you would put an X and then an explanation to your moderator. What you mustn't do is put in a mark for that particular candidate, okay? So if a candidate is absent on the day or injured on the day, don't give them a mark. Give them the X. But that is, once again, that is explained in the instructions for the conduct of the examination, for the conduct of the controlled assessment. I've just put this next slide on because this is really the part of the specification that we're looking at. Applying skills, knowledge and understanding in physical activity. And the analysis is analyze and evaluate physical activity and identify action to bring about improvement. Right, absent candidates don't get naught because this depends on you. I mean, it depends upon the situation. By being absent, you mean they just deliberately don't turn up. In that case, they'd get a naught. They weren't there. But if they're injured, then they can apply for special consideration. It is explained then exactly what to do. So they would need a doctor's note, for example, to show that they were away, and so that you could be satisfied that it was a clear absence and so on. Okay, I think we've covered that that slide, that handout thing now, because we've got the we can get rid of that one, and that's the weightings also, and that's in the specification. Those are two little clips that are taken from the specification, so we can move away from those now and get back to the presentation. Right, I'm just looking at the questions again here. Okay, so where would I find the performance marking criteria for each sport or activity? Okay, if you go to the Edexcel website, look for the controlled assessment guide, okay? And that will give you all of that. If you can't get it, then if you can't find it, log into Penny and she'll email your copy. Okay, so it's the controlled assessment guide is what you want for that. And that's got everything in it. That's got the things that's going to take you through. In fact, all these things I've been taking here, like those, you can see the slide that's on there now, that came from that guide. And all the different breakdown for all the different areas of activity as well. Okay, we've got another question here now. With fitness, do they still have to do 2 activities, e.g. continuous and circuit on moderation day? Okay, I'm glad you brought that up, because that is important. We haven't got to it yet, and I think I was going to cover it later, but I can cover it here. On the moderation day, they only have to do their best method of training. Their estimated mark should be based upon their best method of training. In the criteria, it says they should experience at least 2 methods of training, which, if you think about it, is actually impossible, because if they experience continuous training and if they experience circuit training, they've also experienced cross training. But the idea is that for the theory part of it, they will have covered in a practical context at least two, or as I say, 3 different areas of activity. Okay. Well, I mean, I've got this next question. What if the PEP was on their circuit and then they score more highly on the continuous? Well, I would really expect that to be organised and sorted beforehand, because when they get to that situation, you know, you'll know what their ability is in both, and that's not anything I've actually come up against before. I think you would probably know which was the best. Okay, right. Looking back to the slides again now, if we can get them. Okay, so what about the controlled assessment? The teacher sets the tasks. The teacher sets the practices. Notice I call them practices. I don't call them drills. Drills to me suggest something fairly static, and we're looking for something which is active, taking part, nearer the game type situation. And also then the no teaching allowed bit I've already mentioned. And I've just gone over that bit, as I said. I think of practices, active practices, rather than, you know, just drills. They obviously depends, and believe me, I've been to lots of moderations. I've seen some terrific practices, but also I've seen some not so good ones. It depends upon, obviously, the type of activity. In football, for example, there'll be one type of practice. In racket games, there'll be another type of practice. In trampoline, there'll be others, because they're different forms of activity, if you like. I think I've taken there the 3 sort of groups, if you like, where there's a team competitive situation, there's a racket or bat type situation, and then there's the individual thing like trampoline or gymnastics. You must take into consideration, if it's badminton, then it's boys against boys, girls against girls. But they also play mixed, so you can play mixed doubles as well. So, because that is a generally accepted situation. But it wouldn't be right to put boys against girls or boys and girls in the same game of football. and that wouldn't be what they'd be expected to do in a game type situation. So you wouldn't do that in a game. You must consider then the specialist positions. And although we would expect the goalkeeper to be able to kick a football, we would want to show them in the goalkeeping keeping situation. The same with, for example, a wicket keeper in cricket, a scrum half, and so on. And then I'm still just sort of trying to get a look at the questions as well. Yes, I'm just confirming that the mark that say I do circuit training in my personal exercise program and continuous training, but I actually perform better in continuous training on in your estimated mark for me. You give me the mark for my best one. On the day of the controlled assessment, you give me my mark for the best one. So if you've got a circuit training group, they should be the ones who are best at circuit training, and the continuous ones should be the ones who are best at continuous. I'm just looking for another question here. We do the PEP in year 10 and then other fitness methods later. Which do they show? Well, once again, it's the moderation day we're looking at. It is. I have to say, I've been to lots of moderations. It is very unusual for them not to know which one is going to be their best one. So they would more 99% of the time they would use their best one in their PEP. But if they don't, they would have to explain that, and in their evaluation, for example, that they might explain that in their personal exercise program. Okay. Okay. I'd like to go through the slide, but also you can see across to the next page what I'm actually talking about. I'd like to go on to the next slide if I can. Have I covered all of those? Yeah, we talked about the specialist positions. Okay, so what about the practices? Well, it is about their technique and it is about their contribution. So, for example, the skills part is their technique, and then their contribution would be sort of in the game. And we can see that as well, probably in all the activities. So if we looked at something like badminton, it would be their individual skills, technique, but then how they play in the game. And their final mark is based upon those two. And then the same sort of thing would even come up in trampoline, I think, where it would be the individual skills, but finally, how do they actually put the whole thing together? And if I'm thinking, well, their skills are around a 7, but their performance is of the routine is an 8. Is it a 7? Is it an 8? Then the performance is what you're actually looking at finally, and that would be where I would make up my final mark. So if I've gone, they can do this, they can do that, they've got good technique and so on, so I think they're a 7 or I think they're an 8, but when they performed out of their skin and they were a 9. Okay, well, that would be the telling factor, if you like. Okay, if they are moderated on circuit training, does their PEP have to be on circuit training? You would expect it to be one of their training methods. So I think it says in the PEP, in the spec, that they should experience 2 training methods. You would expect them in their PEP to do that, to do 2 training methods, and then okay, what have you got here? Can it be on another activity? Right. Okay. Their PEP could be to improve their performance in football, and they could say, I'm doing circuit training because that's going to help me my muscular endurance in football. Or they could say, I'm going to do continuous training because that's going to help my performance in football. Okay. I mentioned about rank order, it does help to put them in rank order, and I think we can get rid of that as unit 2 on the side now, because what I talked about is actually on that particular slide. Okay. Differentiated practices. Practices should test what is in the criteria. at the appropriate level. I've talked about that one. You know, if they're a 9 or a 10, I think we might even be coming to a video that will show this, then their practice should be at that level and test them at level. If you're not sure, talk to the moderator about it, and if you're first one, talk to the moderator before the day. The E9 is almost certain to reflect what the practices were like. You know, the practices were good, or the practices need adjusting, whatever. And it depends, as I said before, about, you know, team games and so on, and we'll have a look at some as well. So we've looked at individual and racket games, and what happens if they do static practices. The chances are they won't achieve the mark they may be capable of. If they do static practices and that doesn't test them to the level, they may well not achieve the mark that they were actually worth. So we're looking at some differentiated practices. They're practices, not drills. I mentioned about the E9 report. Talk to your moderator about it if you need to. I'm going to give an idea about practices, but they're ideas, not set practices. We don't all have to do the same thing. And I do find that students respond better to better practices that are challenging and bring them out to their best performance, trying to make it like a game type situation. And I've mentioned there that always comes up in moderator reports. Game type situations, as I've said, small-sided games, team games, and it is in your moderator reports. Now, I'm rushing to get through to this, and we do have a lot of slides to get through, but this is just an idea. This was my practice for football as an example. This is my warm-up, but it's giving me an opportunity to see the students' ability to control the ball. So I've got a circle about the size of the centre circle on a football pitch, something like that. And in this, they're going to show their ability to control the ball with their head, their ability to pass the ball, their ability to move, their ability to control with their thigh, with their foot, with their chest, depending upon how the ball's fed to them. So we have 6 players around the circle and 4 players inside. The 4 players inside show for a ball. The player that they show to feeds them the ball. Now, if they're weaker candidates, they may just pass the ball along the 4 side foot. The player receives it, controls it, and passes it back. Then goes off to look for another person to receive the pass from. And you may have said, all you're doing is side foot passes. Now, for the weaker candidates, that may be what they're capable of. At the other end of the scene here, I'm looking at, they don't know how the ball's going to be fed to them. It could be thrown, it could be kicked, you know, various ways it could be thrown to them or got to them. They receive the ball, it may be on their head or their chest or their knee, whatever. They have to control it and pass it back and run off and receive another ball. In running off to show for another ball, they've got to make sure they don't bump into the other guys in the circle. Now, I've used this practice in netball, in basketball, in hockey, and you know, and it can game type activities can be, you know, this practice can be adjusted too. But that's just an idea. That's just the way that I did it. So we see them here having controlled the ball. They've made their decision. They made their decision of how and what part of the body they're going to control the ball with. They control it and pass it back, run off in the other, and show for another pass from another player. Okay, the development of this might be for the weaker candidates. It might be 2v2 or 3v3, but they would have a player. I'm looking for my next little click there. They would have 4 players on the outside for the weaker candidates. So it wouldn't be 2 blues versus 2 reds. When the blues have got the ball, they've got the other 4 players on their team, but they're not allowed into the play. You'll see there on the diagram, the X's are only allowed to go down the line that they're playing on. If a blue passes the ball to an X, the X passes the ball back to a blue. Okay, if it's 3v3, it makes it a little bit more difficult. Or you can take out the 2 X's on the end. So it becomes 4v2, not 6v2. Then you can develop that into putting the 2 X's at the end into the goals. and then it becomes blues are attacking one end, reds are attacking the other end, and the 2 X's on the outside go onto this team who have got the ball. So that if the reds have got the ball, the 2 X's on the outside are on their team. Now, I've also got a C in each corner, 2 red and 2 blue. That's my coaches. They're practicing analysis of performance. So that when we have a little timeout, the blue team go to the coaches and the coaches coach them and suggest ways that they can actually improve their performance. So I think we're getting some more questions up here in a moment, which I'll try to attend to as much as I can, as soon as I can. The other alternative, of course, is to have 1 extra player, and then it becomes 3v2 or 4v3, and the guy in green goes onto the same team as the team in possession. So if the 3 blues have got the ball, it becomes 4 blues versus 3 red, and it's just a way to adjust it in that way. I'm having a look to see if I've got some more questions here. Okay, right, we're moving on then. Right, okay, so we're having a look at a trampoline here. Now, I don't know whether any of you do trampoline, maybe I should have asked that, but it's just to use it as an example, as an individual sport and practices. In this activity, it could be you start off with the simple skills, and they can do individual skills, and you tick them off, one by one. Then they could, all the better ones might, individual skills might, that's a little bit easy for them. So you can put the simple skills like, they can do the simple skills like half turn, tuck, pike, straddle, full turn, or half turn, seat drop to feet, tuck, pike, straddle, full turn, something like that. So you can build up a small routine where they're not doing the routine, but they're showing you the skills put together. Or they might do the individual skills, then a small routine. Then they might do the more difficult skills on their own. It might be that they can't do a front somersault in a routine, but they can do it as an individual skill. But then they put together their final routine and they do their routine. I'm not sure if we got any questions. No. Right. Did I have a question there? Right. So they can show a fitness method they have not done their PEP on. That would be very unlikely. I have to say they really should do one of the ones that they've done in their PEP. So that we would really want to know why that would happen, because they really should know certainly their best 2 methods of training, and they're not going to show cross training, so that narrows it down. It's unlikely that they would show weight training, although some do, but they could. So it would be very unlikely that would happen, and the moderator would probably ask questions and would want a good reason why. Okay, if we can move on there. The other thing that they might do is they might come on and do their final routine because they're very good. And, we might just say, okay, that's really, really good. And then we might pick out some, skills that they've not done in their routine, like a half a turntable or a turntable or a cradle, something like that, which they may not have done in their actual routine. Right, so marking the practical activities again. You must use the controlled assessment guide, and it is really important. Moderators should be referring to it as well. I do, and I read it the night, the things I'm going to do, I read the night before, and I photocopy the individual pages of what I'm going to see the next day. I think it's nearly 200 pages, the controlled assessment guide. I'm only going to see 4 things the next day. I would print off the 4 activities I'm going to see, so I've got the criteria handy and with me. Building up the profile then of the students, and also making sure you've got them in the correct order, and that helps as well. Okay, yeah, could we see the first of all, I would like to have a look at the template for the trampoline assessment, the tick-off list. What I just wanted to show you with this is that this candidate has come on. and that was their routine. Okay, now in the criteria it gives an idea of the points that they need to score, the tariff they need to have in order to get certain level. She then does it again. Okay, and I think we may actually see that one more time. Now, I would suggest here that the teacher should have given her a rest, because she's obviously getting tired now and she's doing this routine over and over again. Also, have a look. 1, 2. Right. Well. Oh. Okay. So can we finish with the video now? Okay. What I would, if we can get back to the. There we go. I don't know whether you do trampoline particularly with your students, but that student's routine was not correct. There were 11 contacts and there should be 10. And the student in that situation should have written out their trampoline routine and handed it into the teacher, to the moderator, so the moderator could see, and it should have been tariffed correctly. And it should have been the right number of bounces in it, because it's like a competitive situation. So they really should have made sure that there weren't too many bounces in it. I can't remember what mark she was given, but that's not going to be, that great, if you see what I mean, because obviously you've got to take into account the fact that her best move in a competition would not have counted, because there were too many. But that candidate did also do the individual skills, but I think that she would have maybe done a better routine if she'd just gone on and warmed up and then done it once and then got off, and then the next candidate get on and do the same thing, and then if she wanted another go, get back on and do it when she'd had a rest. Okay, so let's move on, because we need to crack on here. As I said, it is important to look and mark from the criteria. We would have had a look at a life-saving one next there, but I think we're getting a little bit behind time, and I do want to try to get through all things. But on the life-saving one is done very nicely in that the teacher demonstrates every one of the skills in the order of the specification. So the teacher sets the student the task of doing the first skill and demonstrating it, just exactly like it's set out in the criteria. So that really shows that they know what they're doing and they follow the criteria. And it's almost like a tick-off list. Individual skills like that are very much like that. And there's certain activities which, skiing, for example, is very much like that as well. With the trampolining, there is a mark sheet, which is very helpful to you, which was devised by a colleague of mine, where if they've got to do certain skills to get to a certain level, and the tick-off sheet fits with it. And that's in the back of the controlled assessment guide. So if you want to access that, you can. Once again, if not, if you get to Penny on the community, she will show you where it is. So there are other candidates that we've got there. The only thing I would say with this, we've got some videos. Maybe if we do have time, we could come back to them sort of towards the end. I think, Abby, we should be taking a break for 5 minutes, should we, shortly, to give you guys a bit of a break. And then if we could just have a look here, I would mention to you things that you must consider. Things like, if the candidates do something off-site and you're not teaching it, it may be they're a member of a boxing club, as an example. Okay, so if it's something like amateur boxing and it's in a boxing club up the road, then if you go down and mark them, okay, that will be their mark, because I will be seeing you maybe moderating netball or something, or football or something on the day. But you can also do a video of them as well. And maybe we could see the boxing video, Abby, and then we'll finish this slide and take a break for 5 minutes. Okay, so this is the center when we get there. Okay, that's the controlled assessment guide at the bottom. This is a little video of a student who was doing boxing outside the school. The teacher went down, they did a little video of it, and this was what they did. So they did the little training bit. Now, if you've seen boxing at all, you don't skip like this if you don't go to a boxing club, believe me. So they showed a little bit about, and I don't know whether I can manipulate this, but yeah, okay, hopefully I can. Right, so they did a little bit of skipping. They showed the boy on the bag, and already I can see that this guy is a boxer. You know, he's got the skills, and if I'm looking at the criteria, I think I can see him moving up to that. We then move up to a little bit of work with the coach. So once again, we can see that this boy is marked at the right level, and then there was a little bit of sparring to finish, and if we can finish there, but just to give you an idea of how and what it should look like. Competitive swimming, important to go through and make sure in the criteria, if they're going to be a top candidate, you've got to show the right things. For example, if they only swim 50 meters, they're not going to get the top mark. To get the top mark, they've got to swim it over 100 meters. So, make sure you mark them at the right level and give them practices to get to the right level. Okay, Abby, should we take can I just show you, in the bottom here, this is the controlled assessment guide, and then I find it very helpful to have it on my computer, because you can just click and go to whatever page you want, and you've got the criteria there. You will find that the page numbers at the top don't correspond with the page numbers on the page. By that I mean, if you want to go, if the football is on page 27, I think actually you have to type 29 into the page, because the first two pages are not numbered, but you'll soon find your way around that. Okay, so I'll flick the next slide up, but then if we could go and take a 5-minute break there, and then come back in just a moment. Okay, thanks. Okay, I've got a couple of questions. If you watch a candidate outside of school, for example, at their boxing club, and mark them, do you also need the video for the moderator? I said at the start that is, you don't. You actually need a video. This centre was, I think, like it's sort of making sure they did everything right, or and got everything done, as it were. So we did see the teacher at the school doing, I don't know, football or basketball or something or other. So they didn't actually need the boxing video, but I think they just wanted to make sure that everything was fine, and I think they also were very proud of the boy, because he's obviously very good. Answer to the next question, has the controlled assessment guide been updated? It's not been changed since last year. There were 1 or 2 points which we would like to update, but it hasn't been changed since last year. Okay. Now, if you go to the community's website, you will and log on to that and sign into that. Then, if it is changed, you'll get a copy sent to you probably automatically, and certainly you will get notified to say that it's on the website and you can go and get it. Yeah, okay. We are looking at the trampoline spec, and there is no tariff. There is just different routine lengths. Right, okay. What I'm saying there is, if a student is good and if they really know what they're doing, they will be able to write out their routine, and they will be able to tariff it. And that would be good then, if they could do that, and they would show them, at a higher sort of level. And if they can do a 10 bounce routine, obviously, and do it well, it's obviously better than an 8 or a 6 bounce routine. I hope that clarifies that one. They are marked out of 10. No, sorry. Surely they are marked out of 10. Yes, they're marked out of 10. But in trampolining, you would, in your competition at that age, you would expect them to do a 10 bounce routine. So if they do a 6 bounce routine, they're not going to get a top mark. If they do an 8 bounce routine, they're not going to get a top mark. I hope that
sorts that one. Right, okay. If you only have 8 candidates, you have to do a DVD and submit a DVD evidence, so you don't get a visit. Okay? You could join with another centre, but obviously that needs to be set up, and you would need to inform the moderator that you intend to do that. At my centre, we did from time to time have a local special needs school come and join us on our moderation day, because they only had about 4 or 5 candidates. So you can do that, or you can do it to give do video evidence. I hope that sorts that one out for you. Okay, marking practical activities, exercise activities, continuous training. Now, if I don't know how many of you do fitness training, I hope it's all of you. It was a big sort of thing of mine, as I said I would say to you, because I think you can really put over. I've been talking to centres and delegates over the last 3 days and banging on about this. There's such a lot of the theory that they can not only learn but actually do in the fitness training unit, which is one of the reasons for having them do a minimum of 2 exercise training methods, and they'll learn lots of other things and do lots of other things as well, even learning about the muscles that they're using when they're exercising. So that's exercise activities. While you were away, I had the controlled assessment guide up there, and I clicked on page 88, and that brought up the fitness training criteria. It's actually on page 86. It's just that 2-page different. Now, I wanted to have a look at continuous training, and I did want to show you a video clip, but we can't sort of make it work, I don't think. But on continuous training, because the majority of people who do continuous training use Cooper's 12-minute run as their test on the day, and that will give them a level of performance. Okay, now all the tests in the specification are on the Brian Mack website. I don't know whether you use Brian Mack. I really hope you all do, because it really is a great website, and he has on there a table for Cooper's 12-minute run. Well, he has a number of tables, but he certainly has a table for 16-year-old girls and and another for 16-year-old boys, and it's set out neatly into our levels, so that if they're at the lower end, if they're poor, that equates to our 1-2. If they're excellent, that equates to our 9-10, and in the middle, it's our 5-6 is something like good, and then 7-8 is very good, and then I think 3 and 4 is something like average. That is only to give you an idea of their performance ability at that Cooper's run. Obviously, you've got to take into account, as you will see in the criteria, their technique, their warm-up, their cool-down, and so on, and also their personal exercise program and all that sort of thing. So that really is very, very helpful. Okay, so the link is in there, and that's great. If you'd like to use that, there's lots of really good stuff on that website, and I'm sure you'll find it very, very, very useful and very, very helpful. The criteria, as I said, is in the controlled assessment guide between pages 80 to 103. There's a specific criteria for each method of training, but there's also criteria for body pump, Pilates, and yoga now, and interval training, because people have asked about those as areas, and obviously, particularly interval training, it's clearly very, very important. So that's the information on the fitness training unit is in there, and there's a lot of it, as you can see, and we've done our best to make sure that's clear and helpful to you. We can move on to the next little slide there. In fitness training, on the day of the moderation, if you're going to do, for example, a circuit, you would need to set the circuit out. I certainly wouldn't expect every candidate to do the same circuit. I would expect them to do the one they've done in their personal exercise program, because their PEP must be available on the day, and if a student does a different circuit, I would want to know why, because I would want them to demonstrate the one that they've done in their personal exercise program, because I'd want to ask them some questions about it. They show their best, as it says on the slide there, method of training on the day. If they do continuous training, then I wanted to show you the little video, because of as much for the way that it was organized as anything else. if I can describe it to you, then it was done in the school playground, which was flat, which was helpful to the candidates. We had a set of tables at one end. The candidates wore heart rate monitors. The candidates had a partner. So the partner could record their heart rates, their resting heart rate, their working heart rate, and their recovery rate. And that goes onto a form which is in the ICA document, and that is submitted by the candidates each one of them on the day, and probably would go on the front of their personal exercise program, either paper clip to it or stapled to it. So if they do continuous training, then we'd see their warm-up, and this was on the video. You see their warm-up. Actually, one of the students was asked to take the warm-up, and he was very good, and it gave him a chance to show that he could actually take the warm-up. They set off on their run, and then they give every time they come past the table, they say what their heart rate was every minute, and then they finish their run, and then they complete their cool down, and then we can work out how far each candidate ran. So we can then check that against the Brian Mack table, so we've got their performance level. We can also look at their personal exercise programs then, and if we want to, ask questions about it. So to give you an example, the boy who ran the farthest ran well past the excellent. So he was a 10 for the actual performance, but his PEP was not very good, and he didn't know very much about it. So for me, he was a 10 for his performance and a 6 for the PEP. So when you read the criteria and interpret the criteria, that makes him about an 8. Or it doesn't make him about an 8, that makes him an 8 for his mark for fitness training. Because it's a balance of their performance and their technique and their personal exercise training program. We are working, I've got a question here. Is there standardization for competitive sports like cycling, rowing or continuous? We are actually trying to work on that, and one of the ones we're looking at the moment is a 12-minute swim. And we are looking into cycling and rowing as well to see if there's anything that matches that. Okay, so once again, we've got to move on because we've still got quite a bit to do. So so the controlled assessment then, the session is 12 minutes Cooper's run, or Cooper's swim, if we can work that one out, 15 minutes maybe. How long will the circuit take? Up to about 20 minutes. So we'd expect them to be performing for about 20 minutes, 12, 15, 20 minutes, according to whatever they do. If they're doing something like circuit training, you might do something like I did, like I'd have about 15 stations out there, and all their PEPs would be covered then in terms of if they've done 6 or 8 stations, their stations would be out there. So they wouldn't all be doing the same one. They would know what exercises they were doing, and they'd know where they were starting, and they would move to each different area, say every 30 seconds or 45 seconds, depending upon how you actually run your or organize your circuit. So the criteria then for the fitness training is based upon their training program, how they use the principles of training and so on. Obviously, we want them to work safely. The level of fitness, hence Cooper's run, that sort of thing. The technique when they're performing, their preparation, indeed in their warm-up and so on, and their cool-down. And it might be that they can lead the group, but they don't have to. That might be something like, this is a super-duper candidate, they can even lead the group. And of course, the evaluation in their personal exercise program of how the whole thing has gone. So that's how the criteria works. Now we've covered an awful lot of this, so we can move on fairly quickly. We've looked at technique and so on, and how they do their program. So we've managed to get through there. I'm just looking to see if there are any more questions. No, they're not at the moment, I think. On the day, they do their preferred method. We talked about 12 to 15 minutes, so that's fine. We covered that one. the moderator can talk to the candidates, and they do need to have their pet with them, because they're likely to ask them questions about their personal exercise program. Okay, so they might explain why they did that particular tests, for example, or they might be asked questions about their yoga and the exercises they use for that, and so on, in their personal exercise program. Okay, I think we've covered that one. What I would say is, if they have circuit training cards, it would help, because it would, on the training cards, it would probably say what exercises they were going to use, how long they were working on each exercise, and they could take the card with them from station to station and show where they're going to go next. It's not a problem if you want to put music on, and I certainly would for mine, because I do think that having music while they're doing the circuit is very, very helpful. If they went to a fitness gym, there would probably be music on there. And then an analysis of the training session as well that they've actually done. I can whisk very quickly through this. This is just taken from the criteria. So we're looking at excellent levels of performance, technique, and fitness for the top band. They're very good on performance, technique, and so on the second band. And then it's good to average. And then it's moderate, limited when we get to the 3-4, and it's poor or low level or limited level when we get to the level 1. Okay, and also there's criteria for each method of training. So continuous has got its criteria, circuit has got its criteria, weights has got its criteria, and so on. We've mentioned about the Cooper's Run. This is where I would have put on the video, so we don't need to have that now. This is what I said about the boy who was a good candidate. You can see he was number 25, and he ran 3,300 meters in that time, which is a pretty good rate, as those who have done it will know. And then you can see that number 20 dropped out injured, so for him it's special consideration. And you can see the distances that the other guys ran there as well. I mentioned about the organisation in having a table at the one end of the course, so that the candidates' distances are marked on there, the circuits are marked, and then we can measure exactly how far they've all run, and measure that on the Cooper's Run table in the Brian Mac if you choose to do that. And then in terms of the organisation, well, that's, on the day, that depends how many candidates you've got. Sorry, let me go back to there. So if you've got 10 or 20 or less, it's got to be a DVD. We have centres who've had 320 candidates. I myself have been to a centre with 250 candidates. The situation there is, and I don't know whether any are anywhere near that, but that centre that I'm talking about had a 5-day moderation, a 5-day moderation. I went in on the first day, and I went in on the first day because if there were going to be problems, we wanted them sorted out on the first day. If I chose to, with that many candidates, I could go back on the second day, and that would have been my prerogative, to go back on the second day to see a second lot of students as well, because there are so many, and because there were a lot of teachers teaching, and we wanted to see more than one, obviously a number of teachers who are actually marking the candidates. So we talked about this, we got this at the start from a question, how many areas to see? We would aim to see at least 4 activities from 2 different activity areas. If there are off-site situations, then we might do that as well. In my centre, we had personal survival as one of our activities. So we didn't have a swimming pool on site, so we started off-site at the swimming pool. The moderator met us at the swimming pool. We did the personal survival moderation, and then we went back to school and did the rest of the things at the school. That saved meeting at school, doing an activity, going off-site, doing activity, coming back to the school. So it's organising your day to get the most out of it. Between you and the moderator, you decide on what things to show, and the moderator will decide what students they want to see. Obviously, you choose to show the activity, or the moderator chooses the activities having looked through the forms and having seen your timetable. So, that's once again a decision between the two of you. It's a discussion with the moderator. And as I said right at the start, no surprises on the day. The aim of the moderator will be to see 4 activities and a range of candidates, top, middle and bottom, in each activity. I'm trying to get around quite quickly here to get through to the PEP and the analysis of performance, so we can give that a good go as well. Okay, so the PEP and the analysis of performance, they have to do a PEP in the analysis of performance. They have to do a PEP in the exercise activities, but they only need 1 PEP. If they do exercise activities, they use the same PEP in the analysis of performance. So we've covered that one as we've been going through. If they do exercise activities, the PEP will probably have more depth because they will have spent more time over it over a period of time, and they will have been including lots of stuff from the theory paper as well. In the analysis of performance, they have a variety of ways they can do it, but the PEP has to be written, whether the student choose to do an oral analysis, a presentation, or a written one. There's no leadership in the analysis of performance now. There used to be, but there's not anymore. So just moving on. Okay. I'm just checking to see if we've got any more questions here before we move on. Right, now we're still all right with that. So the personal exercise program then, it's not an oral paper 1. It's explaining what principles of training they've used and how they've used them and if they were successful. It's not just naming 3 principles of training or explaining what circuit training is. They plan their PEP, they plan the principles of training that they're going to use and how they're going to use them, they plan what methods of training they're going to use and how they're going to use them, and so on. It's actually a training program. And then what do they need in it? They need to plan, perform, monitor and evaluate. And it measures, as I say, against, or helps them, as I say, to get through their theory paper as well. Before they start their PEP, they might well have covered these things in the theory, because these are the first things in the theory. So they might well have covered, well, they would have covered reasons for taking part. So they might use that in their PEP. Why am I doing my PEP? What tests they're going to use? Personally, I got my students to do every test, but they didn't use every test in their personal exercise program. They did every test, they got a record of it, they got the name of it, they got the protocol of it on the next column, they got the test before they started their personal exercise program on the next one, then they got the test score at the end when they finished their program on the next one, and then they said whether it's a health related or a skill related test. That's putting the theory into practice. Then they say why they did those tests. Why did they choose the Cooper's continuous run? Because they wanted to improve their cardiovascular fitness, and that's a test of cardiovascular fitness. Then they perform their PEP and they monitor their PEP, and then they do their evaluation, comparing probably their first test results with their second one. Now, what they put into it, it could be that if you've got heart rate monitors and so on, that you are going to draw some graphs of their working heart rate, recovery heart rate, resting heart rate, and so on. They will put in their warm-up and cool-down. I would not expect them in their PEP to have a warm-up written out every time they do a training session. It might be at the start, they say, for my warm-up, for each session, this is what I'm going to do. And they would then outline their warm-up. And the same thing with their cool-down. And then, as I said, how did you use the principles of training? This is just off my own heart rate monitor, and this is the sort of thing they could possibly, if they want, they don't have to, but they might put into their training program. On this particular heart rate monitor, they can download this graph. They don't have to, but that is just, if they've got the option, then there's a chance that they will be able to do that, and that will help them. This is one that shows you've obviously been doing interval training, because that's your heart rates going up when you're running the hard, coming down when you're resting or swimming, and so on. The personal exercise program then, which methods did you use? Why did you choose that method? I'm a midfield player in football, and the Cooper's Run is a good test for my cardiovascular fitness. And then all the answers should be in the PEP. And then, as I said, the moderator may want to ask them some questions on the day. And it might be asking them which tests work best for them. Why did they choose those tests? Would they use that test if they did it again? Or do you think there would be a better one? And then, what about the paperwork? Well, the paperwork and the controlled assessment guide, you've got all the criteria in there and all the criteria you need. Whatever method of training you've used, the criteria is in the controlled assessment guide. And then the students, as we've said several times now, use their best method of training, their preferred method of training. I mentioned the moderation sheet. The moderation sheet for fitness training is in the ICA document, and they fill that in, and so you can photocopy it, or you can download it from the internet actually as well. And they fill that in and put it on the front of their PEP. Heart rate monitors don't have to be, but could be used if they choose to. Right, and this is the form, as I said. Thanks very much for that, Abby. That's great. You'll see the form is on there then. It's got the centre number, it's got the candidate number, and it's got their fitness training for, and so on. And it's got all the information in there then, and blocks to put their heart rates in, so they can put their resting heart rate, their working heart rate, and so on. And it shows then that they know what they're at. They know what they're doing. They know what they've been doing. So we can move on then, hopefully, the next one. I've covered a lot of this stuff earlier, actually. I did mention that in the Cooper's Run, we would be looking at their style and technique as well. That takes us through the moderation process. I do want to leave a little bit more time if you do need to come back with questions. The paperwork then, all of the stuff is in the ICA document. You have a form called the PE34 in the old specification, has now been updated, and it's the PE2 MS. That's the one you put your marks on. The PE34 AP is the analysis of performance. You put the marks for analysis of performance on that particular one. You can get electronic copies, and obviously that works the scores out for yourself. So in the 5 areas of the analysis of performance, if they get 4s in each one, it'll go 4, 4, 4, 4, 4, 20. And then it'll divide that by 2, and that's then mark out of 20, out of 10. And as I said, the paperwork is on the website. Okay, there's paperwork for off-site videos in there. Now, I wanted to get to this to make sure I mention OPTEMs. That's the optically read mark sheets. These are really, really critical. You will get those from your exams officer. And on there goes the total mark for the candidates for this area of the specification. So they're 4 practical marks plus the analysis of performance. Their mark goes onto this form. It's in triplicate, and it really is essential that that's right, because that mark is where they get their grade from. The top copy of that is sent to Edexcel. The second copy is sent to the moderator. You keep the 3rd copy. Now, when I've taken the marks down from you at the centre, I will have all the candidates' marks, so I can see on the OPTEMs if they've got the correct mark. And last year, 2 of my centres had made a mistake on a couple of the odd candidates on their OPTEMs, and they weren't trying to give them more marks. They'd actually miscalculated and given them a couple of marks less, and that could have made a big difference. The marks on the OPTEMs, you must make sure, very important to have those marks right. The E9 form is the form, as I said, which is the moderator's report. It is sent to the centre, and it probably goes to the exams officer. So you must make sure you get your E9. It won't come out before the exam results, but it will come out soon after the exam results. So make sure you get that, because that will give your feedback from the moderator about your assessment. Obviously for DVD, you won't have contact with the moderator face to face, whereas with those who get a moderator visit, at the end of the day, the moderator will give you a general feedback. But the E9 form gives you a much more in-depth feedback. So you get that from the moderator on the day, but the E9 is a more in-depth feedback. So beginning to sum it all up, in moderator contact, it's very important to know the mobile, particularly I suppose, is the most important one of the moderator, and their email address, because documents will be emailed backwards and forwards. Very important to have a timetable. I had a centre last year, and they'd not done the exam before, and they needed quite a bit of help with the timetable, and it hinged around things like building in time to do the analysis of performance. So and then working out a final moderation date, and getting the paper to the moderator. The controlled assessment then, this is in the criteria and the specification and the controlled assessment, about what you need to do. Set the task, take the task, supervise the task, mark the task, measured against the criteria. Just a few slides I really want to make sure I get to. Officiating and leadership. There's only one set of criteria for officiating. As you'll see there, it's on page 33, and there's only one criteria for leadership, whereas in the practicals there's a criteria for football, basketball, cricket, netball, all of those different things, but there's only one criteria for those two activities. Okay, and there's the criteria on the site there. Okay, I'm not going to spend too long on looking at that, because I need to get through quite a few more slides yet if I can. So once again, the official will be marked before the day, and on the day they justify their mark. I think I've got a couple of little videos where I can show this, but I'm not quite sure if the official one will actually work. We did discuss it a little earlier. If they're officiating, they have to show each role of the officiating situation for the game or the activity. For example, in basketball, they would have to referee and know how to score and know how to run the clock. In football, they'd have to referee and be able to run the line, be a referee's assistant. So it's each one of the tasks that they need to actually do. And they must be taking an active part. If I've come in to see them, it would be very important. Say you've got students doing netball, performer, they must be marked and completed. And then if you've got an official doing netball, they can referee those players playing in a game. Okay? Candidates, I've got a question here. Candidates can be a performer in 4 activities. No problem with that. If they, the majority of candidates still do that. Okay. We've got a question here. If students complete a referee's course, can they count as evidence? Brilliant. If they do a referee's course, fantastic. Reports back from moderators this year has said it is very clear that when candidates have done a course run by a governing body and got a governing body award, then they tend to be far better. Another question, if an official leader, do you have to show them on the... Right, okay. Do they have to show them on the moderation day? This is the discussion with the moderator. If you've got 50, I'm not going to see them all. I will see a couple of the top ones and a couple of the poorer ones. But I'm not going to see them all on the day. You see, I can watch 25 students doing football all at the same time, but I can only watch 2 students refereeing a netball match. So we will be building it in as I'm just suggesting there. Okay, we've got another question coming in, but we'll move on to this next bit because I really want to get on to show you a few more things. Okay, what have they got to do? Well, obviously they've got to know the rules and they've got to be able to apply the rules. And you can only be involved in safety situations. You can't be involved in any way other than for health and safety. Yes. Right, okay, you won't decide who's being shown. Do you have to show any? You won't decide. The moderator will decide when they've talked to you and got all your information. Okay, so that will be decided, but you will know before the day who is going to be needed and which ones are going to be needed on the day. So we're moving on. Governing body award has come up as a question, so I've answered that one. It could be then officiating a school or a club match. They have to show in their logbook that they've been doing this over an equivalent amount of time as if they were doing it a practical. So it's about 9 to 12 weeks. So they need to show that they've actually done it over a period of time, not just a one-off match. So that's what their logbooks show, and show the matches that they've actually officiated at or indeed led the students for. What I would suggest to you is that if you've had them officiating year 7s, you would probably want to get a little year 7 group out for them to officiate or coach on the moderation day. But once again, that's in discussion with the moderator. So if the moderator says, I would like to see somebody officiate or see somebody lead, say in netball, and you say, well, they only have coached the year 7s, okay, we'll get a dozen or so year 7s out, so they, or if it's netball, 14, 15, 16 out, so they can do that on the moderation day. Okay, we're looking still at the official here. We mentioned about the log. I mentioned about being present as a teacher, but they can't help. They can only be there for health and safety reasons. And then the same thing with leadership. Leadership, students need to be able to show that they've taken group practices, like I mentioned right at the very start with the yoga student that I had, did over a period of time of 8, 9, 10, 12 weeks. And be training or coaching students for a competitive situation. So it's not just, in the officials thing, for example, at the end of a practice session, they take the whistle for 10 minutes. No, it's got to be a competitive situation. There is an example of somebody asking, is there a template for a logbook? There is an example in the student workbook, which if you go to the community site, you can see where to have a look at that. So if you go to that, if you have a word with Penny, then there is an example. And as I say, you might have for a different sport, I think it's an example of somebody coaching football, or refereeing football. So it's just a template, just an outline to show that for example, the date, the two teams that were taking part, and a place to be signed by an official. So it would be, say, yourself as the teacher or the secretary of a football club or something like that, but not their dad. Their dad's not allowed to sign it. Okay. As I say, teachers can support, but you can't, only for health and safety reasons, be actually involved. Governing body awards we talked about. We had some questions on that. We're actually getting near now to the end, so we've got to move on. Got a few more slides to do. Talked about health and safety reasons. All performances marked by the teacher must have evidence from a logbook. Yes, we've covered that. Okay, if we can see the performance, fine. If not, with the less than 20 candidates, you'll need evidence from on the DVD. And I don't know whether it's possible. Sorry, I would like to get these last few slides, which are to do with the analysis of performance, and then I can talk you through possibly the last video. So we've got a question. Could the leader run the session on the moderation day, or at least some of the session? This is the discussion again. I don't know whether you've done A-level, but that does happen sometimes at A-level, that they run part of the session on the day. What you mustn't do is, I think, is allow the mark of the practical session for your candidates to be hampered by somebody who's not a very good leader running the session. That's why we say a teacher leads and a teacher marks. because we want to get the, give the students who are doing the practical session the best opportunity to reach the highest level. Right. If they lead the session on, I hope this is clear from me here. For example, football, he or she leads the part of the situation on the moderation day. You need to be careful it doesn't interfere and put the marks of the candidates taking part into jeopardy there. Leadership evidence would be almost like lesson plans. If you go to, once again, a community's website, there's an evidence of a logbook there from the student who is doing the teaching of the yoga, Jaina, and she has given an example there of the little logbook of what they've done for their lesson plans. I think, is there any more on that question? No, I don't think so. So very, very quickly then, 5 to 6 or 7 minutes we've got for the analysis of performance. Okay, how do they do the analysis of performance? Well, they can either do it oral or written or as a presentation. The criteria is in the specification. They get marked in 5 different areas: rules, regulations, terminology, observation and analysis, evaluation, planning, strategies and tactics to improve, and their personal exercise program, which has to be written. The others, you've got an option. I would say the majorities, yeah, okay, Abby, that'll be fine. Okay, so it is a choice. The majority of people still go for question and answer because there's teacher involvement. If it's written, then once it's written, you mark it, that's it. If it's a presentation, you mark it, that's it. You are not allowed to ask any questions. On the day, the students' written piece of work will be handed into the moderator to mark. They may ask a question about the PEP, but nothing else. The same with the presentation. They would observe the presentation. They may ask a question about the PEP, but they would not be able to ask questions on anything else. Question and answer, you can ask questions. Question and answer takes about 10 to 15 minutes. On the day, you work in with the moderator when you're actually going to do the analysis of performance. It usually works. You mark the football, they play the game, all the football's marked, finished. They continue playing a game, and you call out the 2 candidates you're going to look at and ask questions from for analysis of performance. They observe the game. The teacher asks them some questions to justify their mark. If they've been given, they ask questions on the rules and regulations and terminology, and then they work through the criteria. The moderator can ask questions as well to see if they can justify the mark. On the day, we would want to see and work in 10 candidates that we could see for analysis of performance. So once again, it depends upon, and it would be across a range. The ideal would be across a range. Not all in football, not all in netball, but some in the first activity, some in the second, and so on. It may be, say you've got somebody who's done a DVD, it may be that they would be asked. We wouldn't be seeing horse riding, for example, on the day, but you may have a candidate who's done DVD, horse riding, practical. We might ask them some questions on the day. The PEPs must be available. And I think I've covered most of it on there. So it's part 2.2, it's on page 46, and the explanation is all set out there, and the criteria is on page 47, and you can see it on that left-hand side of the screen there as well, I think. The personal exercise program we've written, talked quite a bit about. It has to be in written format, and it's covered in the criteria. And then, so this is, I've gone over this anyway, rules and regulations are all question and answer and observation and so on, but the personal exercise program has to be in written format. If they're going to do it as a written, then they do their preparation, but then when they come in, they write it up under teacher observation, so it's done under teacher control. So you are there when they actually do it. And then you can have practice question and answer sessions, for example. But on the day, you can't ask. The idea is not that you ask them the same questions, and the teacher, the moderator, as I said, is allowed to ask them questions as well. Okay, we've got a question here. Does the AOP have to happen on the moderation in the moderation window? No, it could have happened in year 10 because that is done before the day. Okay, that's not a problem, except I would say that they would probably be better in year 11 than in 10. There are no written examples. One of the reasons, are there any examples of written or presentations available as an AOP? I have used some to show in face-to-face presentations, but there are none available to sort of just to have a look at or to have copies of, because everybody, you know, would maybe want to do it slightly differently. The idea is just to give you the ideas of how to do it so you fit it into your situation. I think, right, any more information on AOP? Well, we've got a few more slides to go, and we'll see what we get with that. If we haven't answered it all, then you can ask your question then at the end. So preparations they can do without direct supervision, but the final one, for example, if they're doing a presentation or if they're doing it written, they do it in a classroom, no access to the internet. You're there. They write it, or they write their PowerPoints. The PowerPoints should be bullet points. I think 16 is the limit. If it turns out to be prose, then it'll be marked as a written. I had one last year which had about 120 words on every slide in the presentation, and the candidate just read the slides. So that was taken as a written. So they were marked as a written. So if it had been a presentation, they would not have been marked on the quality of written communication, but because they presented it in the way they did, with I think there were about nearly 2,000 words on the 16 slides, and it was just read by the candidate. It was marked as written and marked, and the quality of written communication taken into account as well. So it is very important to make sure that they don't do that. Once again, we've already covered this, preparation without direct supervision, and it might be things like a match analysis, or it might be observing a video, that sort of thing. So you can give feedback during that preparation time, obviously, but not when they're actually doing the actual thing itself. So we've got the last few slides coming up. So the final assessed performance must be in school and must be under the direct supervision of the teacher. So, as I said, quality of written communication, we've covered that one. The PET must be written, and then once they've done it, the centre retains it. Okay, so we've just got 1 minute just for me to wrap up here. So the centre retains it, that's completed. If you go to the website, there are a couple of little examples on there, not to be downloaded, but that you can actually have a look at them. Okay, the optems I've talked about the consequences of incorrect optems. That's the 2011 grade boundaries, but if you go to the community's website, you'll get this year's grade boundaries, which will obviously be a help for you. Done. Okay. I'm sorry to have rushed through that, guys, but I did try to get through ever such a lot of information in just a 2-hour time there. Okay, as I say, answering here, Claire, do you have any more information on the AOP? If you go to the community's website, yes, there's more information on there. Okay. Okay, can I hand over to Abby now then to finish off there? Okay, thanks ever so much, and Abby, thanks ever so much for your help. That was really brilliant. Couldn't have done without you, honest.
So in a moment.